Hi, Nigam.
Hi, Alpesh, how are you?
Good. How are you? You okay?
Yes, we miss you a lot. How are you? How is everything there?
All well, not bad at all. Just trying to get ready to open up now in the next 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
Our regulators have given us the permission to start. So
This
that's
is
good
great
news.
news. Yeah, this is good
Yes.
news.
How are things in Jordan? Everything closed still?
Yeah, we are still under lockdown,
Oh, gosh.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
But we
yeah,
are
yeah.
going to start very soon. That's why I'm trying to figure out. I think I'm admitting everybody now. Okay, hopefully. Okay, so Fadi is here. Do you hear me, Fadi? Fadi, Suha, unmute, Suha, and Fadi.
Yes.
Fadi, where are you, Fadi? Yes. Fadi, do you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Suha, do you hear me?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Albish,
Yes.
do you hear me?
I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I think we are okay on the right track. I'm still admitting people. Okay. "20 participants so far. Admit all."
Nagam, it would be a good idea to just turn everyone, all the participants' audios and videos off, just so that we don't get any interference.
That's what I did.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Mute all. I just unmute you guys. Okay. So maybe we will wait a few minutes until most of the people are admitted. If you don't mind, guys, we are still ahead of time. It's 2:58. So we'll give a few minutes for people.
Nagam, we're getting people joining in with their videos showing.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to video. Okay, turn off video.
So you know where you've got a column of participants. So if you go into that column, you can turn off everyone else's video apart from the presenters. You mute all and you turn everyone.
Yeah, I did mute all, but maybe okay. I'm trying to see, yes.
Yeah.
Allow participant to unmute, allow participant to... You know what? I will ask them to put their videos off, all of them. Yeah, this is better. Too many options in this application. So how are you, Suha?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And what is the time there in Australia?
It's 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. at night.
Oh, we are so sorry.
No, that's okay.
We
It's a good day.
Yeah, you stay late for us. I know you sleep early.
So if I sleep in the meet while I'm talking, don't panic.
No, we will wake you up. Don't worry.
I'll get there.
And
So
Fadi,
you can hear me well?
yeah, please, for all participants who are joining us, will you please put your videos off? I still see somebody.
You can turn it off. Nagam.
Really? Okay, I will stop video. Yes, I did it.
Yes.
I still think there is no. You've turned the wrong video off.
You stopped me.
You've stopped Fadi.
No way! Really? No.
Okay, no.
I don't. Fadi, I stopped you? No. Where are you?
Yes, you stopped me. Yes, you stopped me. Yes. You stopped me.
I asked you to start video.
Okay.
Are you going to accept?
I cannot.
Ask to start video. I send you.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay,
I'm
that's
ready.
great. Okay, just a few minutes and we will start. We are still receiving participants.
Mute. Can you mute all?
Yeah, I did that, but
Okay.
Albish, Suha, and Fadi, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now everybody is mute except you guys. Okay.
But we need people to turn off their cameras. I have Anamika Pandey, I can see here. Can you please turn off your camera?
Please, dear participants, please turn off your videos and your
And
cameras.
Alia, there's someone called Alia.
Yes, Alia, please.
Alia. Okay.
Okay.
Stop video, Alia.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
All right.
Start it again.
Still receiving
Zainab Suleiman, can you please turn off your video?
One by one. Okay, now you all see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just...
Yes.
Okay, no more participants. Is it 3 after 3?
Okay.
Okay, so we may go ahead. What do you think, guys? Let's go?
Yes.
All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the first virtual collaborative meeting between the Jordanian Society for Fertility and Genetics and the Middle East Fertility Society. Currently, and during this global serious COVID-19 pandemic, it's really very important to share expertise from different perspectives worldwide. And today, as you all know, we are all in the same boat. It's time to put our hands together. It's time to learn how to mitigate the negative effect of the COVID-19 pandemic and how to cope with the invisible risks that we may face every day during our work at IVF labs. It's also very important to know how to keep our patients, our embryos, and ourselves safe. Today, we have 3 speakers from Australia, from United Kingdom, and from Lebanon, who are going gratefully to share with us the regional scope of how to restart IVF lab safely during COVID-19 time. Our first speaker for today will be Dr. Suha Kilani, the IVF Lab Director at IVF Australia in Sydney. She is also a conjoint senior lecturer at the University of New Wales in Sydney, and she will share with us the Australian experience. Thank you, Suha, for staying late, and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I think you disabled the screen in a way, host disabled participant screen.
I will stop sharing and you will share your screen now.
Yeah, I can share it now.
Yes.
No, I still say disabled.
Still?
But, yes. Try again.
No. I think you can share it now.
Try again. No, it comes with that note, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Is it
you
okay?
Still have your screen open? You closed it probably.
I closed my screen. It should be your screen now.
Oh, no. Now it's working.
Good.
Okay.
Maybe it takes time.
Okay, let's start. Okay, thank you, Nagam, for introducing me. And yes, we are in the COVID-19 era now. So I'm going to share our experience in Australia. To answer the question is actually a very important question at this moment. There is 2 stages that you need to do. Other than that, you are not ready. So if you answered yes for those stages, then you are ready. Stage 1, that's when you set everything before you are bringing patients and staff in. And that's what we call preventative measures. So you are thinking about all the points and addressing them. Each country has their own guidelines. In Australia, we follow the guidelines from the Fertility Society of Australia and from ARTAC, which is the accreditation body, and also from the government guidelines. And all of them mostly talk about the same things. Now, we are trying to implement these. That's all before you said to your patients, yes, we're ready to take you. So when you do the setting, you are thinking about the whole clinic, building, or whatever your clinic is in, as a part of the puzzle. So you cannot think of, I'm going to take care of the lab and I don't care about the nurses or I don't care about the admin. It's all affect each other. So first of all, you need to think about the numbers. How many staff you want to bring in? Isn't it better to bring a skeleton staff, not everyone? How you are going to test the temperature of everyone before coming into the building. Also, they have to sanitize their hands. Where are you going to do this? The reception staff, you have to take care of those and you don't want them to get infected. So you need to put them behind a perspex where it covers them. So there is a distance between them and between the patients. Now, enforcing distancing is one of the important parts. At reception, as we said, they're going to talk to the patients. So coughing, or like the patient coughing or sneezing, that you have to protect them from this. If you have lifts in the building, the size of the lift, does it actually take 1 person, 2 person, 3 person? You have to maintain the distance of 1.5 meters. And people waiting outside the lift is the same thing. Then the waiting area is the same thing. You have to rearrange the waiting area. So there is a distance between them. It might actually make the waiting area a bit smaller, so not many seats for patients to sit in. But then that's enforced that the appointments has to be organized in a way that you don't get all the patients around the same time. So maybe your sitting area takes 10, so don't take more than 10 in that hour or 2 hours. And hand hygiene, do not touch anything that you don't have to touch. Now we come to the PPE workers, which is the nurses, the doctors, and the lab staff. So when those people come into the building or the clinic, the first thing they have to do is get changed, get rid of their clothes that they came with from home and wear scrubs. Remembering that the virus actually stays for half a day to 2 days, to 3 days actually, on the scrubs. So it's better that you wear the scrubs inside, and before you leave them in the changing room. Let them be laundered or cleaned there, and wear your own clothes going back home. So that avoid the cross-contamination. Wearing gloves also, and you wear the masks. The mask is very important for the doctors who come face-to-face with the patients, and also the nurses. As for us in the lab, the distancing is important, of course, but we don't come very close to the patients like the nurses and the doctors. But there is 3 points that it is important where we actually are close to the patients. And these 3 points has to be addressed when you organize your plans. So at egg retrieval, so you can be probably close to the where the patient's head is. But the thing what you can do, you just move the microscope or your working stage or your crib far away, like 1.5 meter away from the patient head. When you're receiving the semen samples also, that's another point. So the patient gives you the semen sample, try to have no touch technique. So maybe you have a bench in front of you that separates you from that patient around 1.5 meter to, they can put the sample there, and then they leave and you take the semen sample. The pot has to be cleaned also from outside before it enters the lab. So you use one of the like embryo safe disinfectant. Now, in the embryo transfer room is another place where we come close to the patient. The doctor, of course, has to wear the mask, and some of the places they wear also on top of the scrubs, disposable gowns. As for us, in our clinic, we don't come so close, but if you do, just wear the mask and make sure that you are protected. There's few things that you also need to check and make sure that you have policies and procedures for them. So the identity check, when during the process in the lab, you're doing identity checks when you move gametes or embryos from one dish to the other. Who's double witnessing you? Is it another staff member? How close they're gonna come to you? If they are going to be close, you need to put policies and procedure for that. Like what do you mean by close exposure to that staff? And if you use electronic witnessing, that might be a good solution. So you don't need staff to be around. Now, some of the clinics do training, and the service people who comes and service the equipment. If you don't need them around this time, try not to get them in. If you have to, like there's some equipment has actually needs to be serviced, then make sure the distancing is correct, and they make sure that they take their temperatures also. Then if you have an office also, office is the same. You have to make sure that all the sitting areas are 1.5 meters away from each other. If it's too small, either you don't use it, or make sure that the staff are wearing more protective equipment just to make sure that they are safe. So we're looking after our staff. Now, cleaning the workspace, anything that you use, anything that your hands or your skin touch or the patient touch has to be cleaned before and after use. So the microscopes where you put your eyes, where you might cough in it, or the tools like the pipettes, the handles, the phone, even the phone that you use, the computer, everything has to be cleaned before and after. And of course, your hand hygiene, you need to use disinfectant every time you take your gloves, or between patients, you just disinfect your hands. Now, the eating area is actually important in the building because it can be a very big source of infection. So as you can see here, all the tables are far away, like 1.5 meters from each other. The bigger tables are crossed, only 1 or 2 people can sit on them. Do not share food. Do not offer water cups. Let everyone bring their own food. People bring their own water, okay? Now, if you've done all of this, so you've done your homework, at this stage, you can guarantee that the exposure to the virus is going to be very rare. So this is the protective or the preventative part. Now, we started, we said, okay, we're ready, let's take patients. So easy with the staff, you tell them from the beginning, if you have any of the symptoms below, please don't come to work. The patients, also you advise them, if you have any of those symptoms, to call the managing doctor, and the doctor will decide if it's okay for them to come, or they have to do a test before coming. That's not as difficult. Now, there can be a problem that some of them would not listen and they still come. If they took, as we said before, everyone's going to take their temperature before they enter the building. So if the temperature was taken and was high, then the patient will be offered a mask if they are not wearing a mask, and they will be isolated in a room, and the treating doctor will come and assess. Most probably if they're like symptoms as flu-ish symptoms, is okay. Otherwise, they'll send them to do the COVID-19 test. Okay, like that's not the difficult part. The difficult part, if the patient is still in treatment, now it started the treatment, sorry, and they will probably be 2 days, let's say, in their treatment. And then they showed symptoms. That means that they've been for 8 hours before showing the symptom, they've been infecting or infectious. So what do? You go back and look, 2 days ago, whom did they talk to in the clinic? Whom they were close to the staff or the nurses, just to identify those people. And you need, again, to define what is close contact means, because the Australian definition is 15 minutes of exposure. So if you stay for 15 minutes of exposure, it's okay. After 15 minutes, then it will be, you can get the virus. So those people have to be isolated for 14 days. And what we do then in that case. So you have to have a backup plan if you got a patient who has infected other people, or you have a staff that's been infected. If your lab is big, it's not a big deal. It's not that difficult, because you always can staff or roster the staff different ways. Either you can bring half of the staff in the morning and the other half in the afternoon. If you have multiple labs, you can keep one lab closed, you don't open it. That will be your backup plan. Or you can do 7 days on, 7 days off. So there's multiple options. With smaller labs can be more difficult, because you might not even have a backup staff. So what do you do, like when you have probably 5 to 6 days of embryos incubating in the incubators? Do you freeze all the embryos? Either they are at any stage, or you freeze only the advanced one, like blastocyst one, and leave the others until the lab is cleaned? So that's a decision that the lab should do, or like the manager should do. Now, when that lab is identified as has a person infected in it, you'd also have to decide what type of cleaning you want to do. Do you want to do a deep clean, or you want to do a terminal clean? Who does the cleaning to? Do you bring professionals, or one of the staff can wear the PPE and do the cleaning themselves? And what chemical you want to use? The safest one is always safe, because it's an embryo safe. But if you use ViroClean, which is kills the virus in 10 minutes of exposure, it has a bit of aromatic, we can smell it. So it's a VOCs can affect the embryos, of course, but if that's the only option, you can't do much. So what do you do with the staff? Now the staff that was with that staff that's been infected, they'll finish the job until the end and clean the lab. And that's when they leave the lab, that's when the second team can come in, if you have a second team. So you make sure that everything is done before the second team is coming. Now, what do you do with the embryos if you don't want to freeze them? Can you move them to another lab? You can, but it can be a high risk, because it's been touched from outside. The high risk also of dropping, killing the embryos while you are trying to move them. So vitrification might be the best option in that case. And that's it. That's a quick one. So thank you very much for the Middle East Fertility and CIG for inviting me to talk today. Thank you.
Thank you, Suha, for this informative presentation. And now we will move to the next speaker, and we will leave the question to the end. Our next speaker will be Dr. Alpesh Doshi, who is the co-founder of IVF London, and the co-founder also and the president of the Embryology and PGD Academy in London, UK. Dr. Doshi will share with us the British perspective. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Doshi, and the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nagam. It's very kind of you for the introduction. Can you see my screen?
I should stop sharing.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Can
yes.
you see my screen now? Okay. So again, thank you to Middle Eastern Fertility Society. My name is Alpesh Doshi. I'm a consultant embryologist at IVF London. Today I'm going to be speaking briefly about the UK perspective, or how things have kind of progressed in the UK when it comes to IVF. We have some light at the end of the tunnel now, because we have been given some directions by our regulator, the HFEA, that we could apply to reopen literally from Monday. So it's not that we can open on Monday, we have to apply to reopen to the HFEA. Now, of course, for all the clinics that will reapply to open, they will have to have risk assessments in place and a very distinct and clear COVID-19 reopening strategy, which really needs to describe in detail how you're going to kind of minimize the risk of infection, what your testing policies are, etc. The regulatory authority will review all the documents, and within 5 days of submission, if everything is compliant, will give the clinic the go-ahead to start in a very phased-in approach. Now, of course, clinic staff are also expected to provide patient support and information during the lockdown, guide their patients on when it's going to be right to be opening up, and of course also give any information when it comes to minimizing infection control or staff or patient awareness. We have been keeping our patients regularly updated on our website, social media handles. Of course, when we reopen, we will be playing videos of COVID-19 awareness in our waiting room, etc., etc. More than everything, there is professional body guidelines available now, which are generic and quite universal. So I do encourage for embryologists in other countries to be looking at these guidelines, which have now been published on the professional body websites. So British Fertility Society, Association of Reproductive and Clinical Scientists, EFSHA and ASRM have all come up with very useful and descriptive guidelines on how to reintroduce IVF. And of course, in the UK, what they're suggesting that staff and patients would be signing a code of conduct to ensure that they are minimizing their exposure outside the clinic. So we all know that post-lockdown, when we all open up, we will be expected to have a triage protocol for our patients. And when the triage, what the triage protocol means, it's purely a questionnaire, but it has to be staged. So in the UK, they have advised that we triage our patients 2 weeks before seeing them and before beginning stimulation. And of course, if anyone is triage positive, then they will have testing done for IgG and IgM. And of course, if anyone is found to be COVID positive, their treatment will be deferred. But as Suha very amazingly explained, social distancing is going to be the norm of the IVF world for the next 5 to 8 months or even a year. So all of our clinics, etc., will have to have social distancing pretty much incorporated day in, day out. Try and give some thought to how you're going to take payment, try contactless payment, BACS payment, electronic modes of payment, and try and encourage people not to be using the machines to put their PIN numbers or give cash, etc. Entry point and exit point, there has to be disinfection for patient use. And of course, all of this has been described very well by Suha already. So I'm not going to be speaking too much. She's talked about shift work as well between labs or lab staff. One thing I would want to add is try and really space out your appointments. So for example, for scans, we give 30 minutes between patients, and for egg collections, we give 90 minutes between patients, just so that we can have effective sanitation or sanitization and disinfection. So the starting up is quite important. In the UK, we are going to be implementing a full deep clean before we start any kind of IVF work, which means deep cleaning of all ceilings, walls, a pure clean and wash down of the whole lab and of course clinical areas and the whole clinic. All the equipment may have to be revalidated, especially if you've turned everything off. In our lab, we are going to be revalidating everything. Equipment sterilization, high temperature, Contracon, etc., with incubators is the norm and would be expected to be done. I don't know if this is available in other countries, but in the UK, we have what we call the hydrogen peroxide bomb. So before we start any clinical activity, the night before, we're going to release a hydrogen peroxide bomb, whereby a company will come and release hydrogen peroxide in the lab. The good thing about this is it obviously kills everything, but most importantly is quite safe in terms of what it breaks down to, which is air and water. Of course, no one can be in the lab when the hydrogen peroxide bomb has been released. It's also important that you're using effective disinfective agents, which are virucidal, and Suha has obviously talked about OOSAFE being one of them. And again, we know that it is effective against COVID-19. Give some thought to filter changes in your air handling unit, and as good practice, it might be recommended at this time to be changing your filters before you start up. You will note that many flow cabinets do have UV lamps as well, and I'm not suggesting that you turn these on whilst you're working in the lab, but effectively at night, you can put all your tool holders, everything in there, and keep the UV on for about half an hour. So you can put it on an auto timer, and within half an hour, everything would have been disinfected. So in our lab, we do have our class 2 cabinets that are that have got UV in them, so they can be put on an auto program. Of course, you've got to have effective sanitation protocols in between patients, encourage patients to do their semen at home, as Suhas also alluded to. And of course, a very thorough sanitation protocol at opening the lab and closing the lab every day. Now let's talk about PPE, and again, this has been mentioned, but scrubs have been mentioned, and of course, be very careful. Again, encourage your team to probably change scrubs twice a day if need be. Try and wear, keep on wearing disposable gloves and change them more frequently if need be. Hats, FF2 masks, gowns, visors as well, especially if there's any procedure where you're coming in contact of patients, clogs, and most importantly, a 6-step hand washing technique. I know embryologists are very, very particular about hand washing, but again, the 6-step hand washing is quite crucial, and try and use an agent which is known to be active against COVID, for example, chlorhexidine. So let's talk about specific practices. And again, this has been mentioned by Suha. She's described egg collection and semen preparation and everything quite well, including witnessing. But just a couple of points to add there. You know, try and work in class 2 hoods rather than concealed chambers at this point, because the concealed chambers may not offer protection to the worker, whereas the class 2 cabinet will offer protection to the worker. So I know that the concealed chamber is concealed, so it protects the sample and potentially the worker, but you have your arm ports through which, you know, there is humidified air coming out, which can easily infect. So dilution of follicular fluids or semen sample prior to disposal is quite important, because the bioburden can be quite high in these body fluids. We know for a fact that the embryo or the egg does not have the receptors yet for COVID, so we may not be able to infect the gametes and embryos, but certainly we can infect patients, even cross-contaminate between patients. So it's quite important that once you're done with your egg collection, dilute your follicular fluid in the pot, cap it with tight, and then discard it, and potentially even double bag all the waste that is coming out of the lab every day. Consider regular disposal of your sharps bin more frequently than you used to do before. Try and go paperless if you can, because again, trying to hand over paper from embryologist to embryologist and from person to person can also be a potential risk of cross-contamination. Try and sanitize keyboards. As I said, try and consider having semen production off-site. Ask your men to bring the sample from home within the hour, and try and hand it over in a non-contactless manner. I would suggest that for labs, they should try and use time lapse as much as possible. In that way, it is minimizing bringing the dishes in and out of the incubators daily for the check. Again, only if you are lucky enough to have one of these time lapse systems. Try and avoid sharing pens between staff. You know, try and keep your own. And of course, at the end of the day, try and safe wipe all your pens and common consumables. Pipette holders and everything, as I said, have to be kind of sanitized daily. Try and make sure that you do not keep open packs of consumables, and if there is a spare dish here and there, just try and discard it and open new packs every day. Embryo transfer, the rules are quite clear in the UK. We are not allowed to have their partners come in. It's only going to be the female patient who's going to be having the embryo transfer. So try and minimize partners and mothers or sisters coming in, to try and keep the number of people quite minimal in the embryo transfer room. And of course, if a patient experiences symptoms, you will have to consider a freeze-all and not really an embryo transfer. If you're going to be using cryopreservation, vitrification, try and consider using a closed system, especially for patients who are symptomatic or are COVID positive. And I know I have said that in the UK, the rules are, or the guidance is that we should cancel COVID positive patients unless the patient is a cancer patient or is at risk of OHSS. Of course, when we talk about testing, you have to test the couple, not just the woman. So both the man and woman will be tested. We have taken a view in our clinic that on day 10 of the cycle, both the man and the woman are going to be tested. So day 10 of stimulation, all the patients who are going to go through stimulation are going to be tested. As I said, the good news is that we know that the eggs and embryos do not have receptors. At least that's what we know for now. The bad news is that the virus can be cryopreserved and can be present in your culture media. So it's easy to potentially infect a patient when you're doing kind of embryo transfers and so on. It's also quite important to risk assess, but when you do your risk assessments, consider the following: staff to staff contact, patient to staff risk of cross-contamination, sample to staff, and sample to sample. So all these have to be taken into consideration when you do your detailed risk assessment. Thank you so much, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Albish, for the nice presentation as usual. And we will keep, as I said, the question till the end. If we don't have time, our speakers are kindly going to provide us with their emails to send them what are your questions. And they are really very nice to answer your questions. Now, finally, we come to the last speaker, Dr. Fadi Shuqair, the IVF lab manager at American University of Beirut in Lebanon, and the chair of the embryology special interest group at Middle East Fertility Society. He's also a lecturer at Lebanese University. So thank you, Fadi, and the screen is yours. Are you able to share it? Yes, good.
Okay. Are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to present my perspective regarding the safety of recommencing lab work during the COVID-19 pandemic. Nothing to disclose. To start with, the World Health Organization rang an alarm by declaring the COVID-19 outbreak as a global pandemic. Therefore, during the last 3 months, states imposed strict mitigation measures, reaching a complete lockdown to flatten the curve of infection. Hopefully, the majority of countries have reached the plateau. In addition, this pandemic caused severe economic labor organization in the world workforce risk and employment. Therefore, governments are looking at how to lift lockdown. However, the World Health Organization extended the 1st of May its alarming declaration. So we are still in the pandemic phase. In this regard, the majority of reproductive societies across the globe lately proposed plans to gradually resume IVF treatment, namely in Europe, the UK, some states in the US, Canada, and Australia. Initially, the SARS-CoV-2 host cell entry depends on various receptors, namely ACE2, but other newly discovered receptors. Therefore, it is rational that expression of these receptors in host cells dictates the susceptibility to infection. Along these lines, the common sources of coronavirus transmission in the IVF lab workplace are the gametes. As we see, ACE2 is highly expressed in Sertoli and Leydig cells. Furthermore, ACE2 was found also expressed in the ovary. In addition, new putative coronavirus receptors were also found expressed in oocytes and granulosa cells. So they are putative receptors. As for the virus, it was also detected in blood. Therefore, embryologists should be cautious when handling testicular and ovarian tissues and blood-contaminated samples. Another source of transmission is air droplets derived from staff or patients, as well as contaminated vomits. A final potential source might be contaminated liquid nitrogen. since viruses are resistant to low temperatures. Accordingly, various precautionary measures should be taken. In this regard, the MEFS, the Middle East Fertility Society Embryology Interest Group, proposed a three-tier system during pandemic emergence at early levels, pandemic phase, and return to normal function, since we suspect to have new potential waves of the coronavirus. During early levels, lab managers mainly should develop plans for later stages, perform also hand hygiene compliance audits, identify essential roles in the lab, and assign backup personnel. We should also dedicate spare cryotanks and develop a supply storage plan. As the pandemic progresses, that means at this stage, we are at the pandemic stage, several operational changes should be made, such as creation of rotation shifts, as discussed previously, and increasing the stocks. In addition, patients and staff should be screened, use proper PPEs. Unnecessary patients' visits should be postponed, such as renewal of the cryo storage fees, signing consents. We can send them through email. As for the practical steps, blood splashes should be avoided and COCs should be thoroughly washed. Eye shields should be worn during testicular tissues processing, since they will generate droplets. Closed systems for cryo should be encouraged and zona breaching should be avoided. All the details, you can check them on the website of the Middle East Fertility Society. As we reach a return to normal function, which is not the actual state, we are not reaching a normal function, the patients should also be screened and all the facility should be disinfected. So we are waiting for the WHO guidelines to consider that the pandemic risk is low. Finally, embryologists should be as vigilant and cautious as they usually are. Furthermore, we should plan and be prepared for future potential pandemic waves. In this perspective, the MEFS&Embryology SIG announces a COVID-19 embryology hub, a website for guidance and research ideas. You can check the website where you can see webinars, guidance for the MEFS and other societies, research ideas, discussion forum, and you can request your certificate of attendance. Please don't forget to subscribe to our embryology email-based e-newsletter to get all embryology information and data. So finally, this is not the end, but the beginning. So stay safe and be prepared and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi, for this really very interesting presentation and very informative talk. And thanks all for all your comprehensive presentations. The door now is open for questions as long as we have time. Otherwise, you can send your questions through emails to our speakers. Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
I don't see any hands raising.
No, I'm raising my hand.
Okay. Oh, really? Sorry, who's there?
In the chat.
Can you go ahead, please? I cannot see you, but you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for such informative presentations. It was really lots of information, and it seems that we're all on the same track. We're going, we're taking the same steps all over the world, which makes us feel comfortable that we are doing the right things. I have a question for Dr. Suha and for Dr. Alfish. If you can give us what precautions do you do to maximize protection of the freezing system, especially if the freezing tanks are not vapor tanks, vapor phase tanks. If they are dipped in liquid nitrogen, what precautions do you do to minimize the viral contamination?
Okay, who wants to start?
You can go first,
So how you can start?
Yes. Okay. Well, my answer is in Australia, so far we did not think that the embryos or the vitrification system should be affected because the COVID-19 is more like it spreads the virus through the droplets. So the droplets that comes from the respiratory. The only thing that actually can like infect the other people is just touching the dishes from outside and maybe the straws. So for us, we haven't actually changed anything in the liquid nitrogen or the tanks. It stays the same. So nothing has changed.
So thank you very much. And it's lovely to see you again after all those
Yeah.
years. Thank you, Naham, for putting us together. That's very nice of Naham.
I know.
Lovely
Many
to hear
years.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I
And
just
can I
add
hear
the
your point of view, please? Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Can I just add the UK perspective? I think Suha's right. We don't know a lot at the moment. So, I think there's something whereby we just feel that what would be a potentially good practice. So the approach we're taking in the UK is that for anyone who is showing symptoms or is COVID positive, we're using a closed system. So in my lab, we are using the rapid eye system for anyone who and of course, you may be a lab that only uses the closed system, then you've got a bells and braces approach, but I use an open system. And I don't use vapor only. I could never sleep at night if I was only using a vapor only tank. So I use a fully wet tank, but the only approach or difference we're going to take is we're going to use the closed system, which is rapid eye for patients who are either positive or showing symptoms.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'd like to add, some labs are taking the approach in the UK that they're going to have another dedicated tank for those patients who are going to be positive or showing symptoms.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Naham, am I allowed to ask just one question for Dr. Fadi? Naham, can you hear me? Yes. Fadi, I just have a question because in your notes, you were saying that the virus can be transmitted by blood.
In a few reports, they reported that infected patients, they have the virus in their blood. They can infect peripheral blood cells. So the data, the majority of data, they are related to the SARS, the previous SARS virus pandemic, which had happened years ago, and the newly data published, they are actually emerging from China, and they are not peer reviewed, they are preprints. So what we need to be cautious. We don't know about the virus. We are exploring the virus, and we are relying on data based on the SARS pandemic.
Perfect.
So,
thank you. Thank you, Fadi. Thanks.
Naham, we don't hear you.
Nagam, I think your mic is off.
Naham, we are not hearing you. Okay. We have a question in the chat about the electronic witnessing and the social distancing in the lab. So, Alpesh and Suha, what's your
I think Suha has mentioned very beautifully that if you do have electronic witnessing, this is a great thing. But of course, if you don't, then try and keep your social distancing whilst you can. So in my lab, I don't have electronic witnessing, but what we're going to do, for example, with semen samples, we're only going to be preparing one sample at a time. And the person will come and witness once the entire process is done, meaning the density gradient, the wash tube, the resuspension, etc. So once that whole thing is done, then I would move out of the lab and my colleague would come and witness everything. Of course, I don't know how we're going to deal with what we call the active witnessing systems when we're changing dishes. But again, as I said, if you have a time-lapse system, the beauty is that it goes in and then comes out after 5 days. So there is not that much witnessing to do.
In our lab, we actually been using the electronic witnessing for the last few years. Once you start using it, you just don't know how you've been not using it before. It's just a different life generally. So, but there will be some steps also that you still need to double witness with another human. In that case, you definitely need to wear all your PPE and like avoid to come closer. At the same time, do not stay more than the 15 minutes. That's the rule there, 15 minutes. And usually the witnessing doesn't take much longer than that. We are lucky there that we culture all the embryos in the time-lapse embryoscope. So we actually do not use anything else than the embryoscope. So it's hardly we take the tissues out, like you said. Yeah.
Nagam, can you hear us? You're muted, Nagam.
Yeah, I cannot hear her.
So, we have a question on the chat. Most of COVID positive patients are nowadays asymptomatic. Do you advise a mandatory COVID testing for patients, or wouldn't be enough to follow on the symptoms?
Can I just add that there is from the oh, hello, can you hear me? Okay, so can I just add that from a professional body guidelines perspective, there is no rule that all the patients have to be tested. But I think as the good practice, many clinics, most clinics in the UK are going to be testing their patient at some point. And that is the view and approach we have taken as well. We are going to be testing all the patients. There's another question which is similar, and I'll answer that as well, which is, what if someone is symptomatic or tests positive on day 10 of their stimulation? In the UK, we've taken a bit of a radical approach that their cycle will be cancelled. Anyone who shows symptoms or is positive during stimulation, their cycle will be cancelled.
So, your practice?
Yeah. It's very similar, like Dashi has said. So we do actually we started actually preparing for testing the patients and the staff also, because we also have the pathology lab on site, but waiting until it's developed and it's easy, but it's not mandatory, like Dr. Dashi has said. What was the other part of the question? If the patient is
positive.
Yeah, if they are positive in nearly at the end, close to the collection, I think that it comes patient by patient and managing doctor by managing doctor. So everyone has their different approaches. So we don't have a specific rule in Australia about that. Yeah.
Let me share our experience at the American University of Beirut. All procedures, medical procedures across the hospital should be tested for COVID-19. So all medical procedures and surgeries and operations should be tested. And if they are positive, we will postpone the cycle. Okay. Are there any? Nagam? Nagam is not.
Nagam disappeared. What is she?
Disappeared there. Maybe she had
she's there, but we can't hear her.
Oh, here she is.
Nagam, okay. Is there any question in the chat?
Can't hear her.
Nagam, we are not hearing you. Nagam, you're here? Okay, there's a participant. No, we are not hearing. So,
she's gone.
She's gone, okay. So, let me check if there's any question. Please, to all participants, if you have any question, please, you can write it on the chat section. Soha and Alpesh, are you prepared? What are your measures you're preparing for second potential waves of a pandemic, strong waves?
Very good question, Fadi. I mean, yes, there is obviously a strong concern in the UK that we will have a second wave, considering we are number 2 in the world in terms of our deaths at the moment. So we really feel that the decision that's going to be announced by our Prime Minister tomorrow may still be a bit underplayed when it comes to the lockdown. And of course, because of the whole economical situation, people will be forced to open up their practices and the economy, because how long can you sustain like this for? So we are really expecting another wave. Of course, it's God forbid it happens, but I think we have to be prepared for it.
So also,
I think Australia is doing well so far, so they've managed to flatten the curve. We actually been working or been open the lab for the last 2 weeks, and we've been doing egg collections. We haven't stopped the lab, I would say, even during the close down, because we were still taking care of the embryos that they've been in the tanks, and also still done FETs and IUIs. We haven't stopped all of that. But in the last week, we were really busy with egg collections. As an example, on Monday, we have 20 egg collections happening. So that will be a challenge to keep the distancing.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a long day because all of the cleaning and the distancing. Yeah, but the second wave, I mean, we learned now how to handle the virus. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be any difference from what we've been doing now. And hopefully we don't get a second wave. So keep it clean and everything will be fine.
I think we all have that.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Oh, do you hear me now? Thank you.
Yeah.
I was thinking that I'm talking to myself. Okay. Thank you, dear, for all the participation and all these great presentations. If there is still any further questions, as I said, kindly our speakers will send their emails. I think, Fadi, we can send them over emails to all our members.
yes.
Yeah.
I will send the emails. Okay.
Okay, and thank you very much for your time, for your
Thank you.
valuable contribution and valuable input. Thank you, Albish. Thank you, Suha. Thank you, Fadi.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
Thank you.
Albish and
see you
Suha.
again in another webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you
You're
so
most
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
It's
All
our
right.
Have a good
pleasure.
day.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.